Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Between Tides podcast, sponsored by Portage Learning. We're so happy you're here with us. Let's dig in. Well, hello, and welcome to the Between Tides podcast. I'm Allison, and I'm here with Michelle. Hello. Hello, Michelle. And our guest today is Professor Jessica Gage. Welcome.
Thank you. This is so exciting. It's lovely to be here with you and in a warm room instead of outside where it's freezing cold.
Or in your room where it's cold.
That's true. I don't know where everyone else is listening from, but here in southwestern Pennsylvania, it is beyond frigid and snowy. And yeah, our whole life is just cold right now.
My garage door won't open.
Oh, no. It's actually really sad.
Get like a hairdryer? Like what? Why is it?
It opens if I push the button, but it will not close. So it was closing when I held down the button, but now it's not doing that. So we have to like manually close it.
Yeah, this is just the season. We're in the polar vortex.
Yeah.
Well, we are so thrilled to have you, and I'm going to have to read some of this because I want to make sure that I get it right. But you are a professor and co-chair of psychology and a licensed professional counselor. Is that correct?
Yes.
You earned a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and a Master of Arts in Counseling, both from Geneva College. And this has allowed you to kind of pair your appreciation for the science of psychology and the love of empowering people. Yeah?
So much, yes.
Can you flesh that out a little bit and talk about that?
Oh, I'm going to nerd out big time.
Please, we love nerds here.
I really love getting to connect one-on-one with my clients in my private practice and with my students in higher ed. And I've found that through their treatment plans, like we come up with a diagnosis or we identify what the issue is. And by using what we know that science has taught us will help them be more successful in achieving whatever goal it is that they have. When we just can guide folks using that knowledge and teaching them even a little bit about how their brains work, it can be really freeing and empowering, and then they can thrive in a new way. They fly off and do their own thing. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that because if you just take the science of psychology and leave all of the care and the nurture out of it, you just can't holistically help people.
And some people are really good at that. Like they can do research all day long. And I need those people to really excel so that then we can translate it into some applicable ways. It's just there's so much happening in the field all the time. And so having the opportunity to connect like that and to connect with, I'm that like feet on the ground kind of person. So being able to make those connections is really important to me.
Yeah. So you've taught at Geneva for how long now?
I taught at Geneva I was an adjunct there. So I was there for about a year and a half right out of COVID.
Okay.
So it was during a time when students were trying to get their bearings again, getting back in person in a classroom, trying to rebuild confidence in higher education, rebuilding their own confidence.
Yeah.
Like how do I read again? How do I study when it's not just all on a screen and I'm at home in bed, you know? Yeah. So I came in during a really interesting transition time for the in-person students.
What has been the biggest challenge, I guess, that you've seen in both like the therapy role and also the teaching role? Has there been anything that's crossed over for both, or are they both specifically very different from each other?
I think that there is a big similarity in the ways that folks had to adapt to using technology. So prior to COVID, professional counselors weren't really approved to do telehealth. Our licensing board here in Pennsylvania did not acknowledge that as being HIPAA compliant. Wow. And so once COVID hit, it was either you loosen the reins on this or folks are not going to get mental health care. Yeah. And so thankfully the board did that. And then now that COVID has resolved as much as it can, those things have been sustained. And so being able to even do online learning, that wasn't as much of an option before. And so COVID brought us those things. And so there are some growing pains with that, right? Like people who weren't tech savvy or didn't have access, then we're trying to figure out how do I get caught up on the technology side so that I'm able to fully participate in my education or my mental health care. So yeah, a lot of things have shifted, but I feel like we're fine tuning it now and we're able to make it work for everyone.
And you kind of almost touched on this a minute ago, but what we really want to talk about today is anxiety, especially test anxiety. And I feel like mentioning the COVID era, if people weren't anxious before then, that certainly brought a lot of anxiety to the surface. And specific to students, I feel like there was a pretty large increase, and I'm going by vibes and not by stats, but that there was a large increase in students having test anxiety, both in the amount of anxiety and in the number of students. So let's talk about that a little bit. Maybe start with defining what is test anxiety for people who might not know or might not realize they have it.
Sure. So if I could kind of go meta for a minute,
Yeah.
I like to separate stress from anxiety. Stress is, although different from anxiety in some ways, it's also the same in that it's an arousal state, right? When our bodies are stressed or we're experiencing anxiety, our bodies are amped up to face whatever the thing is. So with something like stress, as we're recording now, we're heading into the Winter Olympic season, right? So we can guarantee that those elite athletes, like the best in the world, will experience some levels of stress during these competition weeks. And that is a good thing. Like science tells us that as our stress levels increase to face the performance ahead, it can increase our performance abilities as well.
Okay.
There is a little bit of a sweet spot, and then beyond that point, that breaking point, too much stress then undermines a person's performance, right? So we want to be able to see folks that their heart's pumping hard, right? We want to know that their lungs are full capacity, getting all the oxygen they need. But at some point, if they start to psych themselves out, then it can undermine that performance. And so stress, an appropriate response to a situation, can be very helpful, can also get in the way, especially when we get in our minds. But anxiety is a little bit different. And so it's one thing that is difficult for me sometimes to balance is that if I am a person's clinician, their professional counselor, I can't also be their professor. If I'm their professor, I can't also, be giving them any clinical guidance. And those are ethical boundaries that are there for a reason, dual relationships and all of that.
Sure.
I need to just serve one purpose in the lives of my students or my clients. So whenever students come to me and they say they have test anxiety, it is not my job to say, is this stress? Are you saying that you maybe didn't study enough and so you're having an appropriate stress response because you're not prepared?
Right.
Or are you having a stress level that's just because you take this seriously? It's the last exam, you want to perform well. Is this the kind of thing that is within the realm of stress? Or is it more of that anxiety focused space where anxiety makes us feel so tiny and it makes the thing that we are going up against feel so big and insurmountable. And so when a client comes to me, I say, okay, we're going to do the diagnostic stuff. We'll come up with a treatment plan. We'll figure out what the interventions are, measure your progress, right? When a student comes to me, I say things like, yes. I just believe them, right? How can I best support you? What has your counselor already talked to you about? What are the skills that they've given you? What are some other resources? Maybe you've talked to student services and student success. What are the skills that they have given you to be able to face these more stressful exams in a different way? So I approach those things differently, but I think the science behind them is really fun. So if I can do a little bit of a party trick.
Okay.
What are some hobbies that you have? Just throw some out and I'll pick one.
I like to draw.
You like to draw. Do you mind if I ask where you draw? Like, do you have a drawing room?
Yeah, I have a little studio in my basement.
It's actually a really cool studio. I've seen it. Yeah.
Thank you.
First of all, this sounds lovely. Okay, so describe for me some of the things that you might see. If I were sitting in your art studio in your basement, what are some of the things that I would see?
Yeah, I have 2 big maps on the wall. One of them is for orders I get. I only have 1 pin in there. And then another one is just like a map of America. I like that one. I have a bunch of books kind of behind me. There's a paper cutter. I've never used it yet, but I got it for Christmas. So there's a paper cutter over there. There's 2 desks. I should have mentioned this. They're L-shaped. And then behind me is a shelf of like my inventory. There's a shelf over here on top of my table. There's a computer. Well, it's just my laptop. There's a bunch of schmutz, just like things that I mean to put away, but they're just like kind of all over the place. Pieces of paper and things like that.
The story of my life. But I love the way this sounds. So you're like surrounded by things that you love.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the way anxiety can ruin it. Imagine that you are sitting in your art studio and you are painting. You're doing something that really brings you joy. You can see your shelves of things. You can see past projects. You see the schmutz. All the things are around, right? All of those memories get stored in a deep part of your brain and they get associated with the positive feelings. Life is good. You might have some stress like, oh, I cut myself on the new cutter that I just got for Christmas.
Sure.
I need to have a stress response that would be appropriate so I can get a Band-Aid, right? Like that part of our brain can be good. Imagine that the next weekend you're going downstairs in your basement. It's not cold anymore, so you're down there all the time,
Sure.
living it up. And out of nowhere, your brand new paper cutter from Christmas spontaneously combusts, just bursts into flames. The fear, right? The panic. You need to have a stress response in that moment. You need to figure out like what stop, drop, and roll, like all the things we were taught. You need to put out the flames, figure out what to do next.
Call the priest.
I mean, whatever it takes, get the paper products away from the flames, right? So anxiety is taking control whenever all of those things that used to be happy or positive or neutral are now stored in that fundamental part of our brain that brings out all of those autonomic stress responses. Like your heart is beating faster, you need to move to get the fire out, you know? Anxiety then takes those cues and says that is now something that's associated with danger. So when you sit in your basement the next time, you might be like, is anything else going to catch on fire?
It's a reasonable question.
Right. But also that's not something that would ever happen. A cutter doesn't
Sure.
spontaneously combust. And it really would not be likely to happen a second time.
Yeah.
But because our brains want to keep us alive, they want to make sure that they're ready to equip us with a stress response anytime there is danger. And so whenever a student is experiencing testing anxiety, they are relying oftentimes on that super stressful part of their brain sending out those stress response signals that have physiological symptoms and psychological symptoms, behavioral symptoms, right? And so whenever they are saying they're sitting down at their laptop, okay, I'm going to fail at this. This terrible thing is going to happen. I'm going to fail this exam. I won't get into nursing school. I'm not going to get the career or the income that I want. We call that catastrophizing, right? It's when one negative thought that might have a piece of truth into it turns into this huge snowball that gets out of control. So oftentimes whenever folks are talking about testing anxiety, they're not talking about like a stress. They could be. They're oftentimes talking about the anxiety that, okay, I'm like feeling panicky during this exam. I can't focus enough to be able to recall the things that I did study. You know, our memory works in ways that we encode, we store, and we retrieve later, right? So we have to pay attention to the things that we need to study and we want to commit to memory. We get them in some storage, whether it's short term, like just remember this address until I can get it into the GPS, you know, or long term, I'm studying for this exam. And then the final step, the recall, is where anxiety really gets in the way, because if our arousal state is so high, it's back there. We just can't remember it. So it's not that you're forgetting everything. It's just that in that moment, you can be paralyzed by all of those things happening in your brain that's trying to protect you. We don't want to turn that part of the brain off.
Yeah.
It's trying to protect you, but it's getting in the way. So how do we manage it whenever it's getting in the way?
So it kind of sounds like you're saying a little bit of stress can help us perform well on a test, but anxiety is kind of fogging up those memories and the recall and all of that, and can have that detrimental effect. That's interesting, because I would have said before this, oh, stress and anxiety are the same.
Yeah.
Diagnostically, no, but it's really interesting. I think that it's important to normalize it for folks, because around 1 in 3 adults sometime throughout the course of their lives will experience a diagnosable level of anxiety. And that can be like a specific phobia. It could be a generalized anxiety or a social phobia kind of thing. And testing anxiety can fall under different categories. Some folks with an ADHD diagnosis experience testing anxiety. So my job as a professor is not to get into the nitty gritty of the diagnosis. My job is what's getting in the way of you retrieving the things that you have learned. Like you actually do know this stuff. So lean into that. How can you feel confident in a way that, you know, harnesses the positive stress you want to perform well without letting anxiety lie to you?
That 1 in 3 people struggling with anxiety at some point in their lives, has that number gone up? Like, have you noticed an upward trend recently, or has that always been like that in your experience?
Well, first of all, I'm biased because so many of the folks who come into my office, even if they're coming in for just a relationship issue, anxiety pops up, right?
Sure.
So I see a different population than maybe just the normal sample that's out there that everyone has just available to them. I will say, I think one of the beautiful things about the younger generations is that they are more likely to say, I'm experiencing something that's severely uncomfortable. I'm going to contact a therapist. I will get the diagnosis and then I'll talk about it with my friends. And so it's no longer just about, you know, are people experiencing these things? They probably were, but there was no space for that before. And now it's more available and more talked about.
Yeah, I know just from a personal experience that I now know I've always had a level of anxiety that I deal with. But that diagnosis or being freely talked about just didn't exist when I was growing up and going through high school and college and experiencing that. And so I just thought I'm a weirdo and I'm high strung, and I just learned coping techniques, right? You learn to
Yes,
manage it
that's
because
cool.
what are your options?
Mhm.
And so in some ways that's been very helpful for me because when you learn how to manage it, then you can function.
Mhm.
But there are times when it feels unmanageable, and I just I have to like hibernate and
Mhm.
just kind of,
Yeah.
ride it out almost,
Mhm.
and then I can get back into like real life. But I do think that it's good that we're talking about it a lot more in mental health in general, but specifically anxiety.
And what you were talking about kind of pushing through, like hibernating for a minute and then getting back to it.
Mhm.
It's similar to your art studio example that will never happen. Let me just give you, you'll never
That's
have to worry about that. If you stay hibernated forever, like that's not sustainable.
Yeah,
We're not
right.
meant to live in isolation like that. We need things that bring us joy.
Yeah.
So taking a break, like kind of like when an animal is wounded, how it'll try to like get to a little safe spot so it can start to feel better. I know. And that's what
It's
it's like
okay.
having anxiety,
No,
right? Like we need to be tender with ourselves, not just like power
Yeah.
through and pretend it doesn't exist. But then we also need to get to the place where we can engage again with the things that we love. And I like to remind folks too, from a clinical point of view, not student point of view, they can work this out. But from a clinical point of view, what you're trying to do with coping skills is connect that autonomic response that's happening in your limbic system, in that part of your brain. You're trying to then engage the frontal lobe. Where's the logic? How can I be changing my self-talk, doing cognitive behavioral therapy
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah.
And for a lot of folks, thank goodness this has been normalized too, there are medications that help pave those pathways or calm down those
Wow.
anxious neurotransmitters long enough so you can practice those new skills, and then you take the medication away under the guidance of your prescribing physician, of course.
Yeah.
You take that away, and then you have those skills that are really in there strong. so
That
by the
is
time
so
you
cool.
go back down to your art room, you're like, I can come into this feeling confident. I can feel safe. Like then your brain's not working against you.
I was going to ask, like, what are some tips that you would give to quickly get over test anxiety? Because, like, if I had a lot of time, I could mentally prepare for something. But if anxiety comes to me all of a sudden in the middle of a test, I seemingly won't have a lot of time to get over it, to do what I have to do.
Yeah.
I think that anxiety doesn't typically come out of nowhere in that kind of
stress maybe does, but not
Yeah.
anxiety.
I guess
Or,
I
like,
meant,
you-
like, sorry, like, if you're in a test and you're all of a sudden experiencing that anxiety, or it mounts to a point where you can't do what you're supposed to do, how then do you back down to a point where you can do the exam properly?
Like
Does that make
function.
sense?
Oh man. So this is the heart of what I do, is that no one's story will be exactly the same. So there's not just one response.
Okay.
And I do think that's the beauty of my clinical work and my work at Portage, because every single connection is one-on-one. And so I can say like, hey, I saw you were really starting to stress out halfway through that exam. Maybe this performance didn't go well. You get a retake in my class. Like you get one retake. So maybe in that moment, you can just acknowledge reality without letting it spin, right? So, okay, this is going to be my weakest exam. This still doesn't define who I am as a person. This does not mean I will fail the whole course, not get into nursing school, not get the job I want. Like, you can stop the spiral. We call it thought stopping, and we can get into that whenever is appropriate. But thought stopping, because it is that, like, when you can feel it, you went from a green light place to a yellow light place, and that's where you want to figure out, okay, how do I prevent this from getting to a red thought?
Sure.
Or also, like, do I need to just stop taking the exam, right? Like, we don't recommend that for everyone. But if it's causing you real harm, like if you are having a panic attack, please take care of yourself. Reach out to your professor. I know the professors that I know and work with will want to talk to you about that afterwards and say, like, okay, let's come up with a different plan for next time. So it's not about getting it perfect every time and performing really well every time. In fact, in my house, we talk about, we celebrate our failures because, as cliche as it might sound, they are learning opportunities. And science tells us, if you get it all right, if you're peaking at a young age, like these young athletes, you are less likely to reach the level that you could if you had actually peaked later in life. They can reach a higher level of performance and excellence because part of it could be that they have then been able to develop these sustained disciplines, right? And so
Wow.
they know how to fail well. They know how to take that feedback and apply it in a new way to slowly grow over time instead of just forcing that excellence that ultimately does undermine mental health and wellness.
It sounds like what you're saying is there's a range of tips and helps that we can go through, and then we can customize those depending on each person's individual level of anxiety, type of anxiety, and coping mechanisms. Like I know for myself, a coping mechanism I've always used is going through what's the worst case scenario. Because the worst case scenario for any of the things that I've been through it's not a doomsday scenario. It is like, okay, I fail one test. That's the worst case scenario if I completely screw this up or have to stop in the middle. And I know that I can still come back after failing a test. I know what my overall performance is, my overall grade is. Or going into a job interview or a school interview. Okay, worst case scenario, if I mess this up, this wasn't the school for me. So I'll go on to the next one. I'll learn from where I messed up and I'll do better the next time. So it's a lot of head work of talking to myself and reminding myself things that I know that are true. And also, I made it through this. I survived that failure. So that gives me hope that I can go on and move forward in a way that's going to be more successful. So for me, those are two really strong things that I've used to kind of cope with my anxiety through the years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
So-
beautiful way of like giving an example for the traffic light, right? So
Mhm.
if you're leaning in, if you start to hear your brain ask that question, that concerned part of your brain ask the question, like what if? What if you fail this exam?
Mhm.
Instead of allowing it to go to that red light place of, then everything will be over.
Yeah, it's the end of the world.
Yes, you have connected, you've built those pathways over time with your frontal lobe to be able to say, actually, what if this is all that will happen? It
Yeah.
doesn't have that much power. Anxiety will try to lie to me and say that it's the biggest thing I'll ever face,
Yeah.
but it's not. My husband and I were talking about how so many folks get really stressed out before their driving test, like to get your license.
Yeah.
Like it could be the worst, especially if you fail it the first time. Devastation, right?
Yeah.
But thinking back, like, no, we've all survived now. And some of us might still not be driving and that might impact your life. But that specific exam day is not really stored in our memories anymore.
Yeah. So, I know that you're talking about every piece of advice or therapy or counseling is going to be tailored or customized to an individual. But obviously here we're sort of trying to talk about some general things as well. So if someone is listening to this saying, okay, I know I can use that stoplight method in the midst of an anxiety attack or a test or an anxiety issue, but what are some general practices or tips that I could maybe use or think about to prepare myself
Mm-hmm.
for moments of anxiety? Are there just general things that I could do to help me not listen to the lies my mental health will tell me?
My favorite tip is that your brain is paying attention to what your body's doing. So, are you familiar with Amy Cuddy? She did a wonderful TED Talk that was trending a while back.
That name's familiar, but no.
She is a psychologist who, she and her team, they recognized that folks, what we experience on the inside can be reflected on the outside. So if we're nervous, we might like shake our feet. Or if we're embarrassed, we might get flushed. If we're angry, you might see a vein pop out of somebody's neck, right?
I call her Vanessa.
Do you really?
She comes out so often.
You named your stress vein.
I most certainly did because I'm so excited pretty frequently and I get pretty angry frequently. She needs a name. She's always here.
I love this.
Feel free to take it.
So also, side note, that's a way that you can externalize an emotional experience in a way that gives you more power.
Okay.
So like if you're wanting to calm down, you can tell her, Vanessa.
You know what I do sometimes? This is kind of a tangent, but when I'm like kind of being mean to myself, I'm like, okay, well, at least I'm not just sitting in my head being a jerk. I'm like actually trying to do something. And that usually counters the mean thoughts.
Yes.
Do you say these things out loud, like at your desk?
Sometimes.
Interesting. I'm gonna have a
Don't
talk with your
diagnose
desk
that.
mate.
Listen, I'm not on the clock for diagnosing anything. I'm just chatting with friends. So it's all fine. But also, those are things that I do too. Like,
Really?
to be able to externalize your emotional experience in a way
Yeah.
that gives you power over it, even just like anxiety. Because the choices that we make are either feeding the anxiety monster or they are taking power back.
Yeah.
So if we stay shut down and isolated and hibernated, anxiety is going to keep growing.
Sure.
Because the lie of the anxiety is you can't do this. So if I don't do it, then it's right and it gets
Sure.
bigger. But if anxiety is saying you can't do this and I say, watch me, look at me, instead I'm out doing the thing,
Yeah.
then anxiety loses power. So it's actually really great. Shout out to Vanessa.
All right, I take it
Not
back.
safe.
It's not weird. It's a little weird, but
Use that.
it's good weird. We're all a little weird.
Amy Cuddy's research.
Yeah.
So so her team wanted to study, we can see that the things that happen to us on the inside are then shown on the outside. What if the things happening to our bodies on the outside are reflected inside as well? Right? So she and her team measured folks' hormone levels, the stress hormones like cortisol and testosterone. And people who were experiencing high levels of stress would have high levels of cortisol and low levels of testosterone. She found, very cool, that if folks took an open, I call it a superhero pose or a stance that is open and proud and confident, that then their cortisol levels, for just 2 minutes, you hold that pose for 2 minutes, cortisol levels will drop and testosterone levels will increase.
Wow.
What?
I know.
That's nuts.
Because it taps into the confidence that's actually there. So you can
Wow.
build on that resilience. So people say fake it till you make it. It's not faking confidence, but it is telling your body what to do a little bit when it doesn't want to cooperate. So if sorry, go ahead.
No, you finish.
So if going into a test, I tend to stress out by question 5. Like I can hold it together. Then maybe you sit and do a power stance for 2 minutes during your exam.
Wow.
Like that's within policy. You're not going anywhere. You're not looking at anything. You can do the breathing exercises.
Yeah.
I'm all about accessible interventions like that.
I think a big thing with that is getting over the fear of I look so silly right now. Like if I knew somebody was watching me and I stood there like this for 2 minutes, I'd be like, dang, I know I look so stupid. You know what I mean? So getting over that, I think, is a big bridge.
And that's an anxiety thing too, right?
guess it
Well,
is.
now you're not only are you going to fail, but you're going to look stupid. Like
Yeah.
that's also a lie. So being able to say, "Oh, that's a red light thought." Vanessa, get it together. Like no, we're not going to do that.
I'm going to fail and look stupid while you're
But it's a lie, right? And truly, professors are not sitting there like, wow, look at this one. Whenever we see a student who is struggling, we are sitting there like, come on, you've got this.
Yeah,
You can
do it.
see that they're wrestling with it. And I am on the edge of my seat. Like you've got the first 2 letters. Like, come on, you can do this. Because we
That's so
genuinely
nice.
want folks to succeed. We want them to
Absolutely.
know the stuff, but we want them to be able to know it well enough to apply it later. An exam is a way that we can check in and test some of that. But ultimately, we want people to feel really good about themselves and the stuff that they're learning.
I love that. And
Yeah.
I have adult children now, and one of the things that I wish I had told them before they went to college, but then started to tell them as they were in college and struggling in different areas is you have people who will advocate for you. Don't see professors as an enemy. Like if you're in a course that's challenging or you're not doing so well or it gives you a lot of anxiety, go to your professor, go to the TA, ask for help. Those 3 words, in my view, are so important for students to remember because, not all of these services existed when I was in school a long time ago, but there are student support centers, there are student success teams, there are great professors, there are, teacher aides, there are people in places who very much are invested in your success as a student. They want to see you succeed. They're not over here like the villain of the story, looking to red mark your paper, looking to fail you, looking to exert power and control over you. They are very much wanting you to ask for help because they have a wealth of resources and advice available. So, one of the things when my team talks to potential students is, and I can sometimes hear nervousness in their voice. Maybe there's someone who's been out of school for 10 years and they're really nervous to go back and take courses again. They're facing a career change. They have a family at home. They're working full time. They have all of these different areas that's minimizing their capacity and they're worried. That's one of the first pieces of advice I'll say is, ask for help. Reach out to your professor as soon as that professor's been assigned to you, as soon as you're in a course, reach out to them, let them know where you are and let them know where you're coming from. Let them know what some of your concerns are so that you can have that open conversation with them ahead of time. And they can give you some tips and they can come around you and they can provide support. It's just, those 3 words are just so good to remember because most of the time in my experience, people are not out to get you. But it can feel like that sometimes when
Yeah.
you're coming from a place where you're behind the wheel or behind the 8 ball, maybe is the better analogy. Metaphor?
Absolutely.
Under the gun.
Under the gun.
We'll just blend them. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Under the 8 ball.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a comfortable place to be fair, under the
Right,
8 ball.
that's true.
No. I think that you're drawing attention to something really important, which is connection is what will help you develop those sustainable kinds of stress management, anxiety management techniques. And you don't necessarily have to know what kind of help you're asking for, right?
Yeah.
Certainly with someone who has a diagnosis that requires accommodation, we want to get them connected with academics so that they can get the extra time on an exam or whatever the solution might be. But it's okay also to just say, I'm struggling. I don't know what to do. So your professor can say, well, what's life like? You know? So the reason that Amy Cuddy's research is so relevant is because what's happening outside of us does matter internally. And there is a beautiful thing about, being able to learn in a classroom. The commute gives you some of that buffer time.
Sure.
It comes with a lot of stressors too. And the stressors of the commute and stuff might be removed with an online learning format. You don't have to schedule your work hours around your schooling hours, things like that. There are so many great benefits. One of the things that might be a challenge is if you have a chaotic family life and that is also where you're studying and trying to take exams, it can be a tough balance. So if you say to your professor, I'm struggling, I don't know what the solution is, I just want you to know I'm struggling, and your professor's able to say, well, what's your testing space like? What's your study space like? And they say, I don't have a quiet space, then we can talk about, like, is there a public library you can go to? We can come up with solutions for what the real problems are, not just tell you to study harder. Like, that might not be the thing. So those situational cues are very important. So if I always study on this couch, research tells me I should take the exam on this couch and not move to that couch.
Wow.
Because my body's taking in all of those cues, all of that sensory stuff.
Yeah.
And it will prime us to then be able to retrieve and recall that information that we stored away during all of our days of studying. So even if you do sensory input things to help manage, right? So if you really love iced coffee, have a nice cold drink. And when you start to get those yellow thoughts, take a cold drink and bring yourself back down to a green thought.
That's nice.
Or a warm, cozy cup of tea on a day like today.
Or maybe you have like a favorite sweater, cardigan that you always wear when you're kind of chilly sitting on your couch studying. Wear it when you take your test, have those comfort things around.
Does it help to have something nice afterwards? Like, if I make it through my exam and I don't die, I can have this treat. Or is that just, would that add to the anxiety, do you think?
Treat yourself.
So rewards are good, right?
I mean,
I love a reward.
I kind of thought that was going to be the answer.
I mean,
I feel like you did.
I'm so glad that I could live up to that imaginary expectation. I want to point out that it's much better to plan something fun after an exam than it is to go check your scores right away. We want to increase distress tolerance. So if your brain is telling you, you need to do perfect, you need to know that you're going to do perfect, and you need to know that you did perfect, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff wrapped up in those anxious thoughts. For you to tell that anxious part of your brain, actually, I don't have to listen to you.
Yeah.
Like the whole Vanessa calm down, right? Like, I don't have to listen to you. You're not going to make my decisions for me. Instead of checking my score right now, which if it's auto-graded, it might not be right anyway. Like, professors go through and double check those things. Like, that's not even necessarily going to be your final score.
That's so nice to know.
Yes. Instead of doing that, absolutely treat yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've done the work. Why continue to torture yourself?
Yes.
Go get your nice thing and then look at the scores.
Yes. Or don't look at the scores for a whole day. Like,
That's good too.
it's not going to change anything, right?
It's not going to change.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like I would want to look immediately just to rip the Band-Aid off. Like, I just want to know.
Yeah. That's the distress tolerance that we want to increase. The
Oh.
not knowing,
Oh.
like being okay with not knowing the result.
Oh, I like
because
that.
it stacks, right? If I get a good score, then I can start on the next module. And then I can get the next module and I'll also be perfect. And then I'll be able to, it's still all performance based. And it's not
Sure.
about balance of your life. Like,
Aw.
don't let don't let that exam take away from the fun thing you're going to do later. Like,
I love
go get
that.
coffee with a friend who will talk to you about anything except school, you know?
Yeah. Wow, I love that.
So let's land the plane here. If I'm a student who is struggling with some anxiety, especially with test anxiety, what's a self-diagnostic that I can look at and see this is becoming a real problem? I think I need more than just reaching out to my professor. I think I might need some counseling or talk to a therapist or a doctor. What's one or two kind of simple diagnostics that a student could go, yeah, I need more help?
I think if someone is asking and wondering, then they ought to reach out to a counselor. Counselors are
great
not
answer.
just here for like a crisis. I mean, we're definitely there for those too.
Yeah.
But we're also here for folks who are just like, I'm not enjoying school.
Yeah.
Oh,
I would like to enjoy it or figure out why I'm not. Like, is it not for me or is it testing anxiety? And so if you're wondering, then do it. A counselor is literally just a professional secret keeper who knows a lot of things to help you live your best life.
Love that
I know.
definition.
I feel like I went into the wrong career
That's really
It's not
good.
too late to
Sounds so fun.
change. You can do
with
anything
Portage
you want.
Learning.
That's true.
That's right.
That's true.
We flex for you.
That's true.
Take a psychology class.
I love psychology. That'd be so cool.
There's so much good stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe we should take a psychology class together.
Oh,
Be fun.
please
That'd
do
be a
it.
lot of fun.
Can we
fun.
do like a recap podcast when you're done?
Yeah.
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 I'm so excited about this.
I'll
Okay.
interview you and ask you, how are you feeling?
You can. You can.
That'd be fun.
Before we recorded, when I had reached out to you initially, I asked you for some resources. So we're gonna try to link those, I think,
Great.
wherever resources get linked with the podcast.
Like show notes or
I don't-
something.
I don't do that, but we have people who know that. So we will link some of those resources. This has been really, really helpful. Like
Yeah.
for me, I wish I had had this conversation with someone like you 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it's just so empowering and encouraging to hear some of the things that you're saying, that these are normal things that people go through, and there are practical, maybe not easy, but simple ways that we can cope and we can manage so that we don't get buried underneath the weight of test anxiety.
Hmm.
So thank you.
I'm so glad. That's what I want to do in the world. Like,
Yeah.
I will not always get it all right, right? Like, I need to keep my own anxious voice in check.
Yeah.
But it's really beautiful to know that this kind of vulnerability brings those conversations. And I think that's
Absolutely.
what I hope to see my students do and my clients, you know?
Yeah.
It brings people together when we know we're really just all going through the same stuff.
Yeah.
We don't have to take it all so seriously, you know?
Absolutely. So thank you. And I hope,
Thank
and I'm sure
you.
that this will not be the last time we have you on.
Yeah.
I hope so. This has been so fun. Thank you
Yeah.
both.
Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, thanks. We'll catch you next time.